Hey guys, welcome back. We left off last time wrapping up the axial skeleton and said this time we were going to start our appendicular skeleton, and so we're going to start this with a pectoral girdle. Your pectoral girdle is going to be the clavicle, two of them of course, right and left, scapula, and then we're going to hook the humerus and all the rest of our arm bones onto these structures right here. And so this is something of an incomplete ring where it's sort of open in the back, closed at the sternum. But this right here is your clavicle. We'll start there and then we'll just work our way down the arm. So just so you kind of know where we're going. Clavicle, scapula is this, what we commonly call the shoulder blade. Kind of makes sense when you see the shape. Humerus, radius and ulna, working our way down the arm. So just so you know, that's what we're looking at. We've also got a couple processes in here we're going to learn in just a second. We'll take a look at how those two are shaped. Coracoid coming forward, acromion on the outside. That'll be important in just a minute. Function of the pectoral girdle, support the upper limb. So we got to hook our humerus to something, right? And of course muscle attachment. You see a big old just giant hook like that, it's going to be hooking to a lot of muscle, and that's exactly what it does. So let's start with the clavicle. You call it the collarbone, but in anatomy we're going to call it the clavicle. The clavicle has this sort of S curved shape. It's going to articulate in the middle or medially with your manubrium, which you just learned was a piece of the sternum, and laterally it's going to articulate with your acromion process of your scapula. And so this is just called the body. This guy here is very logically called the sternal end because it's on the sternum. And this guy here is called the acromial end because he attaches to the acromion process of the scapula. And that might help you actually a little later. So that's all you need to know for the clavicle. It's got two ends, the sternal and the acromial. Sternal's towards the middle, acromial is toward the outside, and that the body's in the middle. So before we jump into the scapula, got to give you a quick note on this because it is kind of cool to connect anatomy to other areas of study when you can. We mentioned that the scapula was shaped a lot like a blade. Here's your scapula, a shoulder blade from a human. And there are other animals that have scapulae that are shaped similar to this. Well, not real similar, a little bit similar to this. And people have known for a long time that it's shaped like a blade. And a little cultural note, it has been used by Native Americans who are subsisting through hunting and gathering in their agriculture, as we've started to see a few of our tribes as we've done a variety of excavations in Iowa and Illinois and some other states. They found a lot of these scapulae, and some of these folks had developed a pretty efficient agriculture system. Instead of just hunting and gathering, they were raising a lot of food. And we think one of the keys to their ability to raise as much food was the tools they made. And this is a scapula from a bison or an elk that's already shaped like a blade. All you need to do is to take the articulations that would normally be used to hook that scapula into that animal and use those articulations to hook that scapula into a long old stick that you carry around. And what you've made is a garden hoe. And here's a picture taken in North Dakota of a lady using this. And it's just a long stick with a scapula on it. You can fashion some supports, out of wood or bone to kind of give it a little more rigidity. But now you've made a garden tool out of this blade. Or maybe we should say a farming tool. But kind of a cool application to anatomy. So here's your scapula. This is going to be the front side of your scapula, anterior view. This is going to be the posterior view of the scapula. Common vernacular folks call it the shoulder blade. You get to call it the scapula. First thing you need to know about scapula is it has something called a scapular spine. This ridge that runs up the back of the scapula is the scapular spine. You might be able to feel that on your scapula a little bit depending on how muscly you are. You should be able to feel it. It should run kind of at an angle across your shoulder blade. So that's the scapular spine. This guy right here at the very top, this is a side view, is the acromion process. Here's the rear view. Most of what you can see is the acromion process right here. And then here's the anterior view, acromion process. It's the most superior structure that you can see on the scapula. And then below that, and in front of it, is the coracoid process. The coracoid curves forward and then downward. And coracoid means like a crow's beak. And you could certainly argue, looking at acromion, that perhaps they both look like crow's beaks, but there you have it. Next thing you need to know is the glenoid fossa. We've already said a fossa was a depression in a bone. The glenoid fossa is the socket, if you will, that the humerus articulates with. And so this is the shoulder socket. We call it the glenoid fossa. So a couple of the joints you want to know. Here we have our sternoclavicular joints, where ligaments attach the sternum to the clavicle. And here we have the joint between our humerus and the head of the humerus fitting into that glenoid cavity. And so just so you can kind of see how these all come together. So as we move down from the scapula, we get to the humerus. This is going to be the anterior view, and this one's going to be the posterior view. So the head of the humerus is this structure right here, and it's going to articulate with our glenoid fossa. Now you've got two structures right at the top that you have to know. We have the greater tubercle, which is on the outside and is quite a bit larger. We have the lesser tubercle, which is this one right here. That's the lesser tubercle, that's the greater tubercle, and this little line that runs between them we call the intertubercular groove, or the groove between the tubercles, right? And so again, we have big knobby, pokey outy things on a bone, so you're thinking, does muscle attach there? And you're absolutely right, of course it does. And so those are a couple structures you need to know. There are a few others. I'd also like you to know the deltoid tuberosity. Would you be bold enough to make a guess as to what muscle might connect to the deltoid tuberosity? Probably the deltoid muscle, the shoulder muscle that allows you to raise your arms up from the side. That's deltoid tuberosity. So that structure is one you want to know as well. So there's C, the lesser tubercle, the intertubercular groove. Okay, so E and F. We got to talk about some tricky ones here now. E and F are the anatomical neck and the surgical neck. All right, this line right here, right below the head, is the anatomical neck because it's right below the head. Now, the part of this bone that honestly gets a little bit thinner, that's called the surgical neck. Okay, so I'm going to drop this down just a little bit lower than F to kind of show the point. Most of your breaks are going to occur where the bone starts to get thinner at the surgical neck, not way up here at the anatomical neck, where really the bone is very, very wide and very strong. And so then we have the deltoid tuberosity, which we've already mentioned, and there are a few structures towards the bottom here that you're going to need to know as well. So this is the bottom of your humerus. Anterior view, posterior view. Deltoid tuberosity we've got from last time. So, anterior view only, you can see the capitulum. This guy right here, this little round thing, that is the capitulum. This big guy next to it, that is the trochlea. Okay? The trochlea you can actually see from the front and the back. That guy and that guy are both the trochlea. Capitulum you can only see from the front. Now, these are smooth, cartilage-covered condyles, which means they are going to articulate with another bone. And those bones are going to be the radius and the ulna. So we're not done with the humerus yet. Okay, yep, we labeled, we drew them, great. Okay, J, the epicondyle. The epicondyle, epi, were around or outside of the condyle. Okay, so if the capitulum and the trochlea are the condyles, then these two little parts of the bone that stick out away from the condyle are the epicondyles. So this guy right here is the lateral epicondyle because he's the epicondyle That's furthest away from the midline. This guy right here is the medial epicondyle because he is towards the middle. Now, this is always in relation to anatomical position, so bear that in mind as well. A couple other things we need to name are the fossas. On the anterior side, this guy right here, he's called the coronoid fossa. On the back, very deep depression is called the olecranon fossa. All right? When you go to extend your elbow, it stops at a certain point where your arm can straighten no more, and that is because the bone in your ulna is touching the bone in the olecranon fossa, and that's as far as your arm can extend without pulling or breaking something that would be very painful. And so those are your structures you're going to need to know for the humerus. So let's see, got it. Yep, we're adding letters. Olecranon fossa, got it. Condyle, a bony, rounded process. Easy peasy. All right, so here's the whole thing. You have a worksheet that's just like this, thanks to medicallook.com, which puts their name all over their images in the hopes that guys like me won't rip them off of Google. But I do it anyway, and so here is your picture. See the olecranon fossa? They give you the little lines showing the almost ridiculous depth that this goes into the bone, as opposed to the rather shallow coronoid fossa. Cool? So, trochlea, capitulum, coronoid fossa, olecranon fossa, still the trochlea, a lateral epicondyle, a medial epicondyle, the deltoid tuberosity, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, intertubercular groove, surgical neck, anatomical neck, and the head. I should be able to give you a blank diagram of that for the test, which I will. No surprises here. You know what's coming, and you should be able to fill that in, no problem, based on your terms to know list. So stuff like medial supracondylar ridge, not on your terms to know list. Don't lose any sleep over that, okay? So let's get to radius and ulna, and then we will stop before the bones of the wrist because that stuff gets crazy. Radius, lateral side of your forearm, okay? So I remember PU, like something stinks. You say PU, pinky, ulna. So hold your arm out in anatomical position. The bone in your forearm that's on the same side as your pinky is your ulna, okay? The bone that's on the side of your thumb is your radius. So this is the lateral side of the forearm in anatomical position. You've got the radius has a small circular head. That small circular head articulates with the small circular capitulum. It's nice how that works, right? We have a radial tuberosity, which is this big old thing right here. Radial tuberosity is where we attach our biceps brachii. The styloid process of the radius is this little fellow right here, and he is going to frame in the many bones that make up your wrist. So you might recall the styloid process of the temporal bone as that long, skinny process that comes out of your skull. Now we have a long, skinny process that comes out of our radius, and we call that the styloid process. So the ulna is a whole different animal. Look at this thing. Isn't that crazy? The shape of this is just weird. Good news about the ulna. That bone that we learned just a little while back, the humerus had a trochlea as the articulating surface. The ulna has a trochlear notch. The trochlear notch articulates with the trochlea. Isn't that nice? They fit together so nice. You can check this out on the skeleton. Anterior side, right? The front side. Now, on the humerus, we learned a coronoid fossa. Guess what goes in that coronoid fossa? A coronoid process. Man, isn't it nice when anatomists do something right? I just love that. Look at that. Coronoid process, coronoid fossa. I love it. I can't get enough of it. Oh, good thing, because here comes another one. Guess what goes in the olecranon fossa? The olecranon process. How cool is this? Oh, man, the guys and gals who named this stuff, they just had it together that day. They did great. Coronoid process of the ulna goes in the coronoid fossa. of the humerus, and the olecranon process of the ulna goes in the olecranon fossa of the humerus. And it's just such a perfect way to name these things. It takes me a while to recollect it, but it's a great way to name them. And guess what? They have a little skinny process right on the end. And guess what we call it? Styloid process. We're just being so consistent here. I'm a big fan of that. So styloid process is on the ulna. It's a long, skinny process that frames in the wrist. Great, isn't it? Okie dokies. So the head is the distal end. Now, this might kind of mess with you a little bit because we're going to take that nice, wonderful consistency and kind of mess it up a little bit. The head of the radius is up by your elbow. The head of the ulna is down by your wrist. So that's kind of a bummer. If we jump back here, radius, head, up by your elbow. Ulna, head, down by your wrist. So I don't know, maybe it's not as beautifully, wonderfully consistent as I thought it was, but there you have it. I don't know. I guess they didn't want to call this the head because they had so many terms in one little space. They just gave up or something. I don't know. Anyways, this lovely little nightmare is the bones of the wrist, and we will save that for next time because I'm getting close to that 20-minute mark, and you've got enough new terms floating around in your brain. So right now, go grab those worksheets that have radius, ulna, and humerus, and scapula. Label them. Make sure you've got them right. Check them against your skeletal terms to know list. Once you know you've got them right, cover up the words and quiz yourself. Okay? That's what we're going to do for now.